This video was sponsored by me. I'm currently working on Iverian, Curse of the Crown, a femme fatale high fantasy comic book about barbarians and nightmares. The first 104 pages are free to read, and we are currently crowdfunding Chapter 3. But more on that later, links below.
Previously on Vikings.
Do you ever bother to read all these great interpretations about your work?
Can I just answer?
Yes, you can.
90% of the time, I have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about.
Oh, and by the way, I did not have the time or the willpower to find enough relevant material to fill up 30 minutes of video. But I still wanted to have some kind of movement instead of just having a static image. It is precisely for this reason that I've decided to fill my level 110 Retribution Paladin or Haya in unrated battlegrounds, and fill up all the empty space with that. There's a lot of empty space in this video. Andy Warhol was the child of a Polish migrant family which moved to America. He was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he was the fourth child of Julia and Andrzej Warhola. He did not feel any bond with his Slavic roots even though he lived in a Slavic ghetto. A Slavic ghetto. His family was rather hardworking, but also poor, and the house in which he grew up in was so tiny that he had to share a bed with his brother. Most people think that he got his artistic talent from his mother, because she herself was a singer and a painter, although just a hobbyist. His mother would often motivate him and his brothers to draw and paint, by offering candy as a reward to the best artist of the day. Andy would always win. And this had a positive effect on his artistic career, and not only him, but also his brother James Warhol as well, who later on became a famous illustrator of children's books. From a very young age, he was introverted and shy.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
He did not spend a lot of time with other children. He would always just sit by himself and draw. He put a lot of effort into avoiding other people, and he disliked being in a room with other people. He was also a lost little boy, in a family that doesn't speak English that well, prone to disease, feminized, and to make things worse, other children would often make fun of him. This situation was made worse when he fell ill with Chorea, which further strained his ability to control his own body and speak properly.
Are you sober now?
No, now, yeah. I'm never, but I
When he tried to write anything on the blackboard, his hands would shake so much that all the other children started laughing, and he had to just sit down and start to cry. Some people speculate that he had some sort of autism or dyslexia. His disease became worse and he had to leave school and stay at home for a while. He spent most of this time writing, reading, listening to the radio, and he spent a lot of time with his mother, who would also shape him as an artist. It is precisely at this time that his obsession with a celebrity status crystallized. He started sending letters to famous people such as the young actress Shirley Temple, and he got back her signed autograph. His way of confronting art and learning about it was rather unusual. Instead of having a typical role model, such as Michelangelo or Duchamp, he was interested in the commercialized mainstream world. And he also learned a lot from his mother. He lost his father early on in his childhood, in an accident where he got poisoned at work. His father went to the hospital, but it became clear to him that he will not survive the ordeal. He told the others to take good care of themselves, not to lose the house, to stay hardworking, and to keep all their savings for Andy Warhol so that he could get to the art academy. "We're gonna be proud of him someday," he used to say. After his father's death, Andy became even more withdrawn. And now, I'm not 100% sure about this part, but supposedly, according to tradition, they had his father's open coffin in the living room. And during this time, Andy never left his room. Soon after this, his mother fell ill with cancer. She spent 6 weeks in the hospital, and for the duration of these 6 weeks, Andy suffered from severe depression. Fortunately, the operation was a success, and his mother survived deep into her old age. Andy's education goes on, and he eventually attends Carnegie Institute of Technology, in hopes of becoming an art teacher. But Andy doesn't change much as a person. He remained withdrawn, uninterested in girls. Some professors call him a talent for art and avoiding human contact. Some even describe him as a holy fool, a naive person of good intentions to whom nothing bad ever happens. During college, he discovers the blotted line technique. It's a kind of a primitive printing technique where you draw with ink on a piece of non-absorbent smooth paper, and then you place that paper on top of one that does absorb ink really well. And this process leaves behind a weird line that's also kind of charming in its own way. This is widely considered to be the first spark that moved him towards the world of pop art, because this was his first encounter with a printing technique. Upon finishing his college, he realizes that there's a whole world just outside of Pittsburgh, and he decides to move to New York. Mom did not approve of this decision, but he stayed persistent. He arrived to New York at the age of 20, with $200 in his pocket and a portfolio. He lived in a small flat with his friends, and he soon became a commercial shoe illustrator for the magazine Success is a Job in New York. And he also got a lot of commissions on the side for various projects such as book covers and album covers. One of the things he was known for was that his portfolio was always wrapped up in a brown paper bag. He didn't have a fancy folder or cover for his portfolio, just a brown bag. For this reason, many art directors started calling him Raggedy Andy and Paper Bag Andy. His first sexual encounter happened when he was at the age of 25 with a man by the name of Carl Willers.
Surprise!
Supposedly, this encounter wasn't what he expected. He still remained shy, and he also hated his physical appearance and his body.
You want penis enlargement pills?
He considered himself to be grotesque, and all of this burden just ruined his special moment. In an attempt to remedy this, he underwent surgery to fix his nose, which his friends often make fun of him for.
Oh my god, look at that face!
If you're feeling suicidal, you've come to the right place.
And he also treated his skin in various ways, but none of this helped his confidence. Not only that, but his hair started falling out as well. It is for this reason that he started buying many wigs, which looked horrible. As if he gave up and just decided to run with it, to run with his own insecurities and leave them out in the open. His obsession with celebrities was still going strong, and this time his new target was Truman Capote. And he wrote many letters to him and was generally obsessed with the man, but Capote later on stated that Warhol is just a hopeless loser.
Start this series. I feel like if you're black, you've simply made every wrong choice.
This event broke him even further. So, guided by this feeling, he decided to make his first public solo exhibition. 15 drawings about Truman Capote. Not a single piece of artwork was sold. And one magical day, Warhol heard someone knocking on the door.
I'll get you, bitch!
It was his mother. She sold the family house and decided to live with him until he finds himself a wife. They lived together for 20 years until she died of waiting and old age. And Warhol was a little bit ashamed of her. Her English was broken. She was a conservative, old-school woman in the heart of New York. Needless to say, she did not fit in with the crowd. But she helped him around the house, which gave him a lot of spare time to work on his projects. And since she had a bit of an artistic click, she helped him out with his artwork. Oh, and by the way, she had a gorgeous handwriting. Andy Warhol actually had it really good in life. He was well taken care of, and he had a lot of money. But people find problems where there are none.
There's this idea that hell is a bottomless pit, and that's because no matter how bad it is, some stupid son of a bitch like you could figure out a way to make it a lot worse.
And Andy still suffered from his ambition to become famous and to become a real artist. He started making a series of artworks that featured gay men.
Slapping around these two balls.
And the only place that exhibited his artwork was a gay pastry shop. Other galleries would often reject him because he was a commercial artist. And after a series of rejections and disappointments, Warhol found himself wandering the streets, only to stumble upon a group of people who were dancing to celebrate the death of a loved one. This event affected him greatly. Seeing this made him realize that life's inconveniences are only a problem because you perceive them that way. And because of this, he developed his famous, pretentious saying, "So what?" Galleries are still rejecting his artwork, but Andy is still trying and nurturing his style. Eventually, he develops a very clean style that we today recognize in his artwork. But again, he is rejected. This time, he wasn't rejected for sexual content
What?
or commercialism, but because his artworks were too clean and sterile, not at all painterly, and this was simply unacceptable in the age of Jackson Pollock. People at the time were looking for something a bit more loose and wild, painterly and such. At one point, a friend of his gives him the advice to paint simple and normal things that other people are used to, like a can of soup. And the next morning, a new line of artwork emerges depicting Campbell's soup.
Throw a brick, it's too heavy. But a can of soup, you can really put some power into that, right? Yes, sir.
Throughout the coming months, he kept coming back to this subject and refining it. And through his experimentation, he eventually stumbles upon the technique called silk screen, which he is famous for today. After this, we see the rise and success of Warhol in the art world, and a series of new artworks such as Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, Elvis, and even some car accidents and similar things that he cropped out of the news. He had his own studio, called The Factory, which was full of drug addicts.
Do you know where I can get any crack? You say, you do? Where?
My house.
You got crack?
And self-destructive people, transvestites, and the likes. He surrounded himself with people who lived in the extreme, whose life was defined by one obsession. And he also liked people who were pretty and who can talk a lot. These people were a source of inspiration for him. Some thought that he's not the creator of ideas, but the one who absorbs them. He even said it himself, that his artwork is unoriginal, because it's easier that way. And at the end of the day, at least he has something to do. His philosophy was, don't think about making art. Just make it. Let the critics and the others decide if it's good or not. If it's art or not.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
And although he was surrounded with drug addicts, he never took anything stronger than a diet pill. This new fame helped him get rid of his anxiety and mental issues, at least in the eyes of his friends. He started acting, he developed a new emotionless voice, and he started behaving very shallow. He used to say, "I'm shallow. Everything's on the surface with me." If you want to get to know me better, just look at the surface of my artwork. But this idiotic performance was there only for the public. Judging by the people that actually knew him, he was very intelligent and well-spoken. He also filmed a lot of movies. He filmed his lover sleeping. He filmed 3-minute portraits of people where nothing happens. He filmed people getting a haircut. The idea was that you can't get into the movie, that you constantly have to stay aware that you're watching a movie. You can't enjoy the movie because the original author did not want that. But Marvel did this way better with their movie, The Avengers.
Ad time. Are you generally bored? Slumped in your chair? Are you tired of looking at React videos for 9 hours straight, even though you don't really enjoy them, but that's the only thing the algorithm recommends anymore? Do you yearn for adventure? For action? For mystery? To place your new boots on land never before seen by tourists? To grab an axe and shield and fight alongside barbarians? To explore the depths of the nightmare realm, never to return? To talk to people who generally look really nice and get at least a solid 7.5 out of 10, even by Reddit measurements? Well, Iverian Curse of the Crown might be the answer you're looking for. Join Saira, the warrior princess, and her band of allies and enemies as they navigate the war-torn lands of Korathia. Fight against the Rokashi, devil-like marauders with a demented leader and no signs of mercy. Travel through cultist caves, strange cities, barbarian strongholds, and sunless temples, and fight against the visions and creatures of the dreaded nightmare realm. But remember, if you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back at you. Crowdfunding is now live, and Volume 1 is set to have at least 150 pages for the low price of $25, plus shipping, and the digital PDF being only $10, no shipping. There are 8 variant covers you can choose from to customize your book. Everyone gets 3 bookmarks, and there are also these very cute stickers you can get. Links below. Now back to the video.
Andy Warhol didn't pay his actors with money. People just joined his studio because of all the drugs and sex that was going on. And matters started getting worse because he attracted people that were horrible and unstable. He was surrounded with young, pretty, and self-destructive people who would do anything just to get his attention. Soon, even a few deaths occurred, where this one guy was high on speed and jumped out the window. Later on, he met the actress Edie, with who he filmed a few slightly better movies. Unlike the previous ones, these had a narrative and actual acting. He tried to use these movies to get into Hollywood, but he never succeeded because nobody wants to watch an out-of-focus movie where everyone just sits in the kitchen and nobody can understand them because the audio quality is shit.
Yes, it was nice.
What happened at the shower, dear?
I had sex with someone in the shower.
Conquering Hollywood was Warhol's last ambition in which he was unsuccessful. And just think about it. What if he did succeed? What would Hollywood look like today? We wouldn't have movies like Batman, The Dark Knight Rises, Transformers 5, Pacific Rim, Frozen. We would have movies like this one. Warhol's favorite actress, Edie, died at the age of 28 because she overdosed on heroin, and this surprised absolutely no one. And supposedly she nagged him for 5 years to get married, which it never, yeah. And one magical day, one magical moment, a truly magical woman entered Warhol's life. Valerie Solanas. She was a hardcore feminist,
I'm reading, fuckface.
and she openly and aggressively hated men. She even started a society called Scum, Society for Cutting Up Men, of which she was the only member. She was also an unsuccessful writer, so she turned to another profession, prostitution.
Fairy.
I suck cock for gold coins.
And after Andy Warhol met this gorgeous mess of a woman, he did what every other sane individual would do. He introduced her into his studio and promised her he would make a movie based on her genius script called Up Your Ass. But little did she know that a promise to Andy Warhol means nothing. But you know what they say, every promise has a price to be paid. And oh man, he paid. Eventually, the people in the factory started hating him because they realized they were being used.
Like a piece of shit!
They started calling him Drella, which was a combination of Cinderella and Dracula. And while this chaos was ongoing, Valerie kept calling Warhol and threatening him because he didn't keep his promise. Warhol reacted to this and tried to find her script. His entire studio was mobilized to find it, but they all failed. Valerie got paranoid and thought that they would make the film behind her back without crediting her. So she called Warhol and asked him for $25 to pay rent. Warhol refused and instead offered to hire her for a role in his next movie, which would be paid. Warhol got what he paid for, and Valerie gave an excellent performance for his movie, which no one in their right mind will ever want to watch. However, their friendship did not improve. In 1968, Valerie hid 2 pistols under her coat and went out for a nice walk. Shit! She wanted to kill her publisher, but he was nowhere to be found. She waited for 3 hours and gave up, and went directly for Warhol instead. She waited a while for Warhol, but this time she was patient. She found him at his studio and shot him once clumsily. He fell to the floor and pretended to be dead. While he was laying on the floor, just in case, she shot him again through the rib cage. The bullet pierced through 4 vital organs and went out the other side. Why she didn't just shoot him through the head? Well, we already established that this is not a rational individual, so don't look for plot holes in her story. He ended up in a hospital, and the doctors thought he would die, but he lived. Supposedly, one of the doctors massaged his heart with his hands, and I think that's pretty fucking neat. His mother visited him in the hospital, and a few hours later, Valerie turned herself into the police. She told him, "He had too much control over my life." Bravo, Valerie, bravo. It's not your fault that you fell off the bicycle one too many times when you were a kid. It's Warhol's fault. Throughout the coming days, Warhol would often lose his consciousness, and he was very confused. And one interesting thing about his stay in the hospital was that, in a way, it was a repeat of his childhood. He was laying down and drawing, reading magazines, listening to the radio, and here's a picture of his scars. Andy believed that God gave him another chance. A quote from Warhol: "Before I was shot, I always thought that I wasn't living a life, but that I was just watching TV. But after the shooting, everything started looking like a dream. Life is a dream. And I used to fear nothing, but now I fear God." His life changed, and he went back to being a commercial illustrator. A quote from Warhol: "Work is art. Money is art. And good business is the best art." Unlike the previous quote, I can understand this one. And that is why this quote doesn't make me angry. It doesn't confuse me. It makes me happy. The world makes sense again. He surrounded himself with people which were the exact opposite of what he used to have in the factory. No drugs were allowed.
And I'm still working on my Coke addiction, my Diet Coke addiction, that is. You know?
And everyone had to come to work on time. He used to mock his colleagues that the transvestites and drug addicts that he used to work with used to be more entertaining and had more ideas. They would always tell him that if that's the case, he should just fire them and hire back those madmen. This plan never came to fruition. After the shooting, the value of his artworks skyrocketed, and it turned into a business. And this is precisely where he went back to painting. By the way, I forgot to mention that he did abandon painting for a short while in order to pursue a career in filming and music. Others considered him to be a sellout now, but that was always the point. His art career became an industry and a business, with commercial tactics to the point where, when Chairman Mao was popular, he made portraits of him. He received many commissions for portraits, and each one was sold for around $25,000. And every single portrait was 40 through 40 inches large, so that they altogether could form a single series of artworks. He never had any burnout, and he was constantly producing new artwork. And just before his death, he made a series of artworks on the subject of Leonardo's Last Supper. Some see this as a sign that he knew he would soon die. He died at the age of 58 because of a doctor's mistake. Supposedly, they overdosed him with water. And in conclusion, we can say that the first half of the 20th century belonged to Picasso, while the second half belonged to Warhol. And now, I'm going to be honest, which is something I do way too often. When I started making this documentary, I wanted to take someone who I could just rip apart, who I could make fun of. I went for Warhol because I thought he was a complete idiot. But something strange happened in the process. I empathized with the man. The middle part of his life is nothing like mine, but towards the end, and especially at the beginning of his life, I saw myself in a lot of his quotes, behavior, and his character. This was truly a strange journey for me, because in my eyes, Warhol went from being a living parody to being a real human being. So you're probably thinking to yourself right now, hey, Luca, now that you've seen Andy Warhol as a real human being, and now that you've seen the history and thought pattern behind his artworks, don't you see the value in them?
The end. So some of you might be wondering why I made an Andy Warhol documentary to promote a book about Conan and Red Sonja fighting against Lovecraft. Great question. I didn't. This video has been sitting on my PC for 5 years now, waiting for a special moment to be released. And I figured that my first ever crowdfunding campaign is as good as it gets. Either way, I hope you had fun watching it. Like and share the video, and subscribe, even though I have no clue what the future of this channel is, but let's find out together. Bye.